I can still remember that damp afternoon. The kind where the Gulf wind pushes the salt into your hair until it sticks. My café, Maribel's Dockside Brew, was down to a couple of stragglers, nursing the last of their iced teas. Graham walked in wearing a denim shirt smudged with oil, his hands carrying that permanent blend of metal and wet wood from the boats he fixed. He slid a lottery ticket across the counter, grinning in that half-serious, half-joking way. Picked it up for fun. Who knows, right? I barely glanced at it before tucking it into the cash drawer with the loose change. Here in Apalachicola, buying a ticket was about as meaningful as grabbing an extra pack of spearmint gum. Nobody really expected anything from it. That night, while I was closing the books, my phone rang. Graham's voice was shaky, so shaky I thought maybe he'd gotten hurt at the docks. Maribel, we won. Over 12 million. I laughed, the kind of laugh you give when someone tells you the moon's just landed in your backyard. But then he sent me a screenshot of the winning numbers, and there they were. The exact same line of digits. It was like watching a storm roll in, terrifying and beautiful. All at once. We stayed up on the porch that night, listening to the surf slap against the pilings, talking about the future, paying off debts, fixing up the cafe, maybe buying our own boat, taking a trip down to Key West. I remember Graham watching me so intently I felt myself flush. Like there was something in his stare I couldn't name. At the time, I had no idea that ticket wasn't really ours. A few days later, we drove to Tallahassee for the formal claim. In the lottery office's waiting room, my heart was still floating somewhere above my ribs. Then the door opened, and in she walked, a woman with a mess of red curls, a floral dress, and a stride like she owned the place. She didn't look at me, only at Graham. I saw him freeze when she set her hand, ringed with a worn gold band, on the ticket lying on the table. Part of the truth clicked into place. But I still had no idea just how ugly the rest of it was going to get. Her name, I learned in the most awkward way possible, was Dana, because that's how the lottery representative greeted her, like she was already on the list. I didn't know whether to shake her hand or guard the ticket like it might evaporate. She finally looked at me then, eyes green but with a kind of sharpness, like she was measuring something. Graham cleared his throat and mumbled, "Dana and I, we bought the ticket together." My first instinct was to laugh, because what did that even mean? But the way his voice flattened, the way he couldn't meet my eyes, told me not to. The lottery representative kept talking about paperwork and lump sum options. But my ears had gone cottony. I was aware of Dana's perfume, a sugary vanilla that didn't belong in a government office, and the sound of her nails tapping against the table. The drive back to Apalachicola was a silence thick enough to choke on. Every now and then, Graham would open his mouth like he was about to explain. But then he'd clamp it shut again. By the time we reached the bridge into town, I couldn't take it anymore. "When you say you bought it together," my voice cracked a little. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, the veins on his hands standing out. "She was with me when I bought it. We've been friends a long time." Friends. That word can do a lot of damage in the wrong mouth. I stared out at the bay, the water looking darker than usual, even under the late afternoon sun. Back at the cafe, I couldn't focus on anything. The regulars came and went, asking if I'd heard about the big win. Small towns don't keep secrets long, but I just kept pouring coffee, my mind replaying Dana's hand on the ticket. I told myself maybe I was overthinking. Maybe this was just some weird arrangement, a coincidence even. But deep down, something in me already knew there was nothing accidental about that ticket. By the end of that week, Dana had become an unavoidable shadow. She'd call Graham to talk about the payout logistics, and somehow those calls would last an hour. He started driving to her place, some rental near East Point, across the bridge, claiming they had to sign papers the lottery office needed. I knew I should have asked to go along, but every time I tried, he'd brush it off with a quick kiss and a promise to be right back. One night, after closing the cafe, I drove past her street on the way home. I told myself it was coincidence, that I wasn't snooping. But his truck was there, parked under the one flickering street lamp. The cab light was on, and through the windshield I could see the two of them, close enough that their heads nearly touched. My chest went tight, not because of what I saw, but because of what I didn't. There was no stack of papers, no pens, no envelopes. Just them, laughing at something I wasn't part of. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch steps, listening to the boats clink against their moorings. When Graham finally pulled in, the smell of that same vanilla perfume trailed in with him. He tried to talk about the next steps with the money, buying new engines for his work, maybe upgrading my espresso machine, but his voice was too bright, too rehearsed. The next morning, I found a folded receipt on the kitchen counter. Not a lottery slip, not paperwork, just a receipt from a roadside diner 2 counties over. Dated 2 days before the drawing. 2 entrees, 2 coffees, and 1 lottery ticket, marked with the exact numbers that changed everything. The date hit me like a wave. It was the night he told me he'd been working late at the marina. I stared at it for so long the paper grew warm in my hands. That was when I realized, this wasn't about luck. This was about them. And I had no idea how deep it went. I didn't jump at him right away. That's not my way. In a town like ours, if you want the truth, you don't light a fire, you wait for the wind to shift. I kept that diner receipt tucked in my wallet and started asking small questions. Not to Graham, but to the people who'd talk without realizing they were telling me something. The marina guys were easy. Give them a coffee on the house and they'll tell you what someone had for lunch 3 Tuesdays ago. Turns out, Dana had been hanging around there for months, helping Graham on weekends. No one thought it was strange because, apparently, she used to date one of the shrimp boat captains and was known for making herself useful. That phrase stuck in my head like a splinter. At the cafe, I went through the old delivery logs. On the night of the diner receipt, Graham had borrowed my truck to pick up filters from a supply store in Panama City. I called the store. They'd been closed for renovations that week. Every little thing I found was like a knot in a fishing net, small on its own, but impossible to ignore when there were so many. The worst was running into Dana at the grocery store. She acted surprised, but there was no real surprise in her eyes. She leaned on her cart, tossing in a casual, "You and Graham must be so excited. Big money changes things, you know?" I told her it wouldn't change who we were. She smiled at that, but it wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile you give when you know something the other person doesn't. That night, Graham came home late again, smelling faintly of fried food and salt air. I set the receipt on the table between us without saying a word. He looked at it, then at me, and something in his face, something small but sharp, told me the story I'd been avoiding was about to spill out, whether I wanted it or not. He didn't pick up the receipt right away. Just sat there, rubbing the back of his neck like the right words might be hiding under the skin. "It's not what you think," he said. And I almost laughed because every liar in the world starts with that line. I didn't say anything, just waited, because silence can be louder than shouting. Finally, he picked it up, folded it in half, then in half again, stalling. Dana and we've known each other a long time. Before you. He stopped, chewed on the inside of his cheek. We were together. Years ago. We stayed close. The night we bought that ticket, we'd had dinner, just catching up. She picked the numbers. I paid. Catching up. The phrase felt like a slap, not for what it meant, but for what it left out. And you didn't think to tell me? My voice came out low, steady, the way it does when you're trying not to break. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. I didn't think it mattered. I was gonna split it with her, just fair, you know? Half to us, half to her. Us. Her. The words swirled in my head until they didn't feel separate anymore. So all those trips to East Point? That's just you being fair? He didn't answer right away, and that pause told me more than his words ever could. When he finally spoke, it was quieter. She thinks the ticket is hers. The air between us seemed to shrink. And what do you think? I asked. He stared at me for a long moment, then said, I think we wouldn't have it without her. That was when I knew, this wasn't just a fight over money. It was a fight over the story he'd been telling himself. One where I wasn't in the first chapter. I didn't scream, didn't throw anything, didn't even tell him to leave. That would have been too easy for him, too clean. Instead, I smiled, the kind of smile that keeps people guessing, and said, all right, Graham. We'll figure it out. Inside, my chest felt like it had been filled with broken glass. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, jotting down numbers, phone calls I needed to make. Names of people I could trust, which in Apalachicola is a short list. In the morning, I visited an attorney in Panama City. A woman named Corinne who used to be a shark in Miami before moving up here for a quieter life. I told her everything, from the vanilla perfume to the diner receipt. She listened without interrupting, then leaned back and said, if your name's not on the claim paperwork yet, we can make sure it is. And if the purchase wasn't clearly documented, there's room to maneuver. That word, maneuver, sat in my mouth like strong coffee. Meanwhile, Graham thought I was busy ordering new café chairs with our future winnings. I played along, even let him take Dana to Tallahassee for more signatures a second time. But I was already working behind the scenes, pulling bank statements. Asking a buddy at the gas station if their security cameras still kept old footage. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Graham and Dana at pump 3, laughing. Her holding the ticket before they drove off toward the diner. When I watched it, something shifted in me, not anger exactly, but a cold certainty. They thought they were holding all the cards. They didn't realize I was building my own hand. And when the time came to lay them down, I'd make sure neither of them walked away with the jackpot they expected. The day of the final appointment in Tallahassee, I told Graham I'd meet him there, claimed I had a supplier meeting for the cafe on the way. He didn't argue, probably relieved not to have me in the same room with Dana. What he didn't know was that Corinne had already filed an amendment to the claim the day before, backed by an affidavit from the gas station clerk and a notarized statement that I'd been in possession of the ticket in my cafe before the drawing. Paper trails matter more than pillow talk, Corinne had said, and she was right. When I walked into the lottery office, Graham's face froze like I'd stepped in holding a gun. Dana's smile faltered too. The rep explained there had been a procedural review, and that Effective immediately, the payout would be split into 3 equal parts, one for Graham, one for Dana, and one for me as co-owner of the winning ticket. Graham stammered something about this being a mistake. But Corinne slid a folder across the table. Not a mistake. Documentation. The silence that followed was thick enough to stand in. Dana wouldn't look at either of us. On the drive back, I didn't ride with Graham. I took my own car, windows down, letting the warm Gulf air tangle my hair. By the time I reached the café, the regulars were buzzing with rumors. But I didn't confirm or deny a thing. Instead, I unlocked the door, switched on the lights, and started the espresso machine. 12 million had turned into 4, but it was my 4, and more importantly, it was mine without owing either of them a damn thing. That night, as the tide came in and the docks creaked under the weight of tied-up boats, I realized the real win wasn't the money. It was watching them both walk away with less than they thought they deserved. While I walked back into my life, lighter and sharper than I'd ever been.